So what I was thinking about when I did this isn't nearly as sexy as log analysis and things like that, but I feel like there are a lot of businesses who don't really know how they're exploring their business risk model and as it pertains to data. So I created a tool that has common regulations in it, and I did it with Claude's artifacts. So it's a zero code solution. It is vibe coded, if you will, and you can choose either a predefined industry and it just lists like healthcare, things like that, or you can put in medical device manufacturing or banana farmers or whatever you want here. And Claude will go look it up and it'll generate you this taxonomy. It takes about 3 minutes for it to do the processing. So I'm not going to show you the processing, but this is the output of it. So it's going to give you document topics that are pertinent to the regulation. It gives you the regulation section. It tells you about the risk impact, the regulation requirements. It gives you examples of the policy procedure documents in question. Then it will also go and give you named entities that are relevant inside those documents that you might need to search for DLP or other data protection tools, links those to the regulation section, also gives you examples. And it comes down and talks about business intents as well. So these are business processes that may be regulated based off of the different parts of any given regulation. And it gives you, of course, examples and impacts. It also gives you classifications of the data that are pertinent. So when you're talking about PHI or things like that, that you might be able to link to existing rule sets that are in your data protection tools. And it gives you the link to the specific section of the regulation and, again, examples and impacts. It also gives this to you in a JSON format, so you can just copy it and download it and parse it and throw it into any tool that you like. I wanted to show briefly how I did this. You just start from scratch to create an artifact, and I just gave it this response. I said, be super concise, use the minimum number of tokens as possible. I gave it an example of an interface that I like, and I said, hey, go pick an industry from the defined list or let me supply my own. I'd like to populate it with named entities, intents, and classifications based on this industry selected or provided. And it generates it. It gives me a plan to go through and review, and I check through this and see whether or not it makes sense. I gave it a little bit of extra guidance to make sure that the JSON objects are generated and downloadable via copy and paste, and it will go and create that. I've noticed that if I get a really long JSON response, it breaks. So I'm going to be adding this to it to say, hey, when you get a response back, base64 encode it before you throw it into the JSON object, and then decode it when you display it. And that will change that functionality for if I get an error for a really long one. And just so that I get to feel all important and sexy like all of the other hacker boys, I'm going to show you how I drop ChatGPT's system prompt. That's the prompt. Here's the system prompt. Any questions? Could this help auditors who are not technical to better understand actual issues instead of whatever hotness they've heard at the last conference? Potentially, it depends on the contextual information that you provide for the company, right? Everything that you give is going to be much more effective if you give it the right context for the company. Claude artifacts can use Claude. In fact, Claude gives you the code that they generate, so you can copy and paste the code to run it independently from Claude. Sometimes they'll require you to put the Claude API calls in it to run it separately, and that won't be printed with it because it does that internally, but you can absolutely copy it out and put it externally. Vibe code not allowed. Yeah, Moon. Okay, sure. Let's see, input a website, generate a threat letter to the founder. He probably could. I see several uses of this to help explain to internal and external folk, maybe add an explain this like I'm 5. Yeah, you could do that. Also, unlike everyone else, I'm going to go ahead and send a link directly to mine. So you can go to that with your own Claude subscription, and you can use your own tokens to exercise the tool however you want. You can also copy the code and put it into your own Claude instance and improve upon it at will. So there you go, POC and source code.